The rapid transit system link project between Johor Bahru and Singapore might cause a 5.4% retail value leakage and impact retail sales by 3 to 4%. Here to talk about this are Mario Braza de Matos from Flying Fish Lab and the Singapore Polytechnic's Januel Ko. Mario and Januel, which retail sectors are most at risk from this leakage?
Right, I think coming as a Singaporean, I think it's not a secret that Singaporeans love to go to Johor to buy groceries, to buy shop for, apparel, fashion, and, buy some technological products and so on, right? So I think along the way, these three are one of the three main retail business that's going to be affected. And it doesn't stop there because when you're in Johor, things are generally cheaper, around 30 to 60%. Hence, there's also a habit where we want to splurge more, right? Since there's a big discount or there's a big exchange rate difference on the pricing, right? So it's not surprisingly that Singaporeans also go there for, haircuts, doing their nails, and then, of course, pampering ourselves in spa, massage, and so on.
Yeah, I agree, General. I think the catchment area is going to be a key consideration. So obviously the businesses that are in Changi will be less impacted by, the opening of the RTS. And while I agree with everything you've said, the focus is going to be on the products and services that have parity. Exactly, you say I can go to a massage in Singapore, or I can go to massage in Johor, and it's going to be far cheaper because cost of labor and cost of space, which are two of the key drivers in Singapore, are going to be very different across the border. Having said that, there is always going to be a significant opportunity cost to consider. So it won't be a small meal that will take people to cross the border. It's going to be something bigger, like General said. So I want to spend the weekend and I'll splurge across the border because it'll feel like, $100, I can go a lot further over there than they can over here. But after the initial excitement of these travel, I think, people's behavior is going to probably settle down somewhere a bit more balanced and not as splurging as it will be in the first few months for sure.
And with that, how can Singapore companies in the hardest hit industries stay competitive compared to those in Johor Bahru?
Singapore is not a cost country, it's a value country. So the simple answer is that businesses need to perhaps consider how they can compete differently. What are they competing on? They cannot compete on price. And Singaporean consumers are very used to going for the promotions, to being attracted by all sorts of commercial activity. But there's also a lot of effort to adding value. So if you look at Taylor Swift coming into Singapore, she wasn't the cheapest artist, but she was one that was delivering a lot of value to her fans. So this is what I think businesses have to do, is to think from a challenger mindset perspective, as we call it, how can they actually compete on different aspects?
I actually do agree with Mario. I think in this case, price is definitely not the word that we want to battle with, especially with the cost of rental in Singapore, cost of products and everything. The costing for retails can go up to quite a high level, right? And if we are on a price war with Johor, definitely we'll be on the losing end. Mario, just a question for you. Do you think price matters to the consumer the most, or do you think the value of the price matters to the consumer the most?
I think it's always down to value, because Singaporean consumers will buy, BMW, and they will go for the $2, chicken rice. So it's down to the value delivered. It's not so much about the price. And I worked in the past with Nokia, and I can tell you, when you go to Africa and people spend money on a phone, it's not because they have the money. It's because the value delivered by this particular product delivers so much value that they're willing to put in months of effort to acquire that. So I think the issue we're struggling with still in Singapore is a mindset where value is about price, and it's not. It's about, what are you giving me in exchange for my dollars? And if what you're giving me is a lot, I can put a lot of money towards that. But if it feels like the same, then of course, consumers use common sense. Can't blame them for that.
Right, exactly. So that's what I thought, right? So I think in general, consumer don't go for just cheap stuff. If their price expectation of the product, the price is here, and the expectation is met, and you go above, right? To them, is more in value, and it will be more worth it than buying a cheaper product.
Would you be able to share how the RTS link might affect consumer shopping behavior of Singaporeans, and what trends should retailers be aware of? Maybe we can start with Januel, then let's hear it from Mario.
So I think during COVID, most consumer turns to online shopping, right? That's when most company, they undergo a digital transformation. And right now after COVID, then the trend has shifted again to more of offline buying and so on. So I think in this change of consumer mindset, consumers are, looking out for different platforms, different opportunities to actually buy the product at the best value price. That's number one, right? I think number two is the what we call the customization or personalization of the consumer preference. I think when we usually talk about business, right? When we talk about the undergoing the omni-channel strategy, it's all about getting traffic to your business, because if there's no traffic to your business, there is then no opportunity, right? Once we understand the logic of getting the customers in, right, then that is when we have marketing strategies in place to actually make the customers buy more stuff. And in this case, membership is also very important. So maybe when they buy for $10, then you say, okay, we can give you a free membership. And when this membership is in place, that's when the magic happens, right? When the membership is in place, right, consumers will then be able to have their customers' preference to what they actually buy on a day-to-day basis, and we can tailor the best marketing strategies or products based on what they want, right? But that's only just the first part. Because in the second part, right, what we want to do is we also want to lock the customers, right? So one of the strategies is also to lock the customers in order to have them, come back for more.
I think my answer would be slightly different, which would be around understanding how consumers are behaving from a catchment area perspective and where they're seeing, people tend to vote with their feet. So where they're seeing the volumes of traffic drop. Some chains have, stores across the island. And so you'll see the stores, for example, closer to Woodlands. If they're impacted, if the volumes are going down, the average purchase, the number of visits, the price sensitivity to promotions, then this would be a signal that, that shift is happening, perhaps faster than they expect initially. But even for those who don't have multiple outlets, current state of business compared to their peers or neighbors, so industry bodies are good places to look for this. I've got a restaurant near Woodlands. And, for the past 3 months, I'm down by 20%. I speak to my peers within the industry, and we're all suffering from the same thing. But obviously, this is more than a one-day, one-off kind of situation. There's something going on, and perhaps it's the RTS that's starting to have an impact. So my only piece of advice there for retailers would be to not try to hold back consumers to what is going to be ultimately a normal behavior in the future. We're not going to prevent people from going over to Johor. We have to live with it. So the question is, how do we lean into it? And how do we therefore create opportunities for Johorians to come into Singapore, as opposed to focusing on the Singaporeans that are leaving and going to Johor? Because both things will happen as the RTS opens.
Now, to follow up on that, Mario, what government policies are needed to support the retail sector affected by the RTS link?
If I had to, try to give some advice, which I think is always a bit of a risk, who am I to give advice? But I guess what Singapore is trying to do is to scale the value ladder. And so anything that the government can do to help businesses generate higher added value from a consumer perspective. So back to the conversation we we're having earlier about value isn't about price. It's about, how much net revenue is generated in a transaction. So I can sell a meal, for $2 or $3 at the hawker, or I can sell a meal at Marina Bay Sands for $200. Obviously, I'm generating more value for the economy there. So what we can do to help companies, training, funds that help businesses to reposition, to transform and adapt and compete differently. So there's a lot of education, and then there's a lot of enabling support that is required, I would say. And a couple of other additional points. I think something the government does really well in Singapore, I find, is the constant monitoring of how businesses are doing. And my last suggestion would be that obviously, GST data can tell you how retail is doing. And so getting that by different regions of the island is also one data point the government can use to understand how that transition is happening and how much support is required at a policy level.
Thank you so much for your time today, Mario and Januel.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity.
Once again, those were Mario Braz de Matos, co-founder and managing partner of Flying Fish Lab, The Control Disruption, and Januel Ko, Digital Marketing and Branding Lecturer at Singapore Polytechnic's School of Business. For more news, visit sbr.com.sg.